Greetings, investigators. My name is Detective Sims, and welcome to another installment of Synopsins. Today we're covering a science fiction horror thriller movie from 2017 titled Life. Watch out for spoilers, and let's get into the video. The Pilgrim 7 space probe was on its track returning from Mars to Earth with valuable samples, which could suggest the existence of alien life. The space probe was supposed to land at the International Space Station. However, the Pilgrim 7 is hit by debris and veers off track, forcing a spacewalk by one of the scientists, Rory, to establish visual contact with the incoming space probe. Before Rory begins performing the protocol, David, Sho, and Miranda help him wear the spacesuit. Rory has control of the arm. When the capsule arrives, it lands and locks into place. Ekaterina, or Kat, the commander, informs Earth that the Mars soil samples have arrived safely. Hugh, an exobiologist, tries to revive a single cell retrieved from the Mars sample by raising the temperature, lowering oxygen, and adding carbon dioxide. Okay, but let's fact check this real quick. Organisms need oxygen to survive. Even if it's going through photosynthesis, it shouldn't be possible without the presence of chlorophyll. Or at least that's what we've discovered on Earth. Here's where the plot gets a little bit too creative with their science fiction. The cell begins to move within minutes, which becomes the first indisputable proof of life beyond Earth. This soon became worldwide news, and Earth celebrates this groundbreaking discovery. School children are given the opportunity to see what's inside the ISS. Students at an American school then give this cell the name Calvin. Why? Just why? You have scientists who are risking their life to retrieve valuable information of the outside world, and you're letting little spawns of the devil name the cell. Also, Calvin? First discovery of extraterrestrial life, and the Americans already decided to give it a gender. Typical. Hugh discovers on day 12 of his research that each of Calvin's cells is a muscle cell, nerve cell, and photoreceptive cells, allowing Calvin to respond to light, movement, and touch. Hugh returns to the lab later that night to play with Calvin. They all wake up the next day with an alarm system indicating a lab malfunction. Hugh later admits that after getting out of there last night, he didn't do any checks. Calvin is no longer active as a result of the failure. Hugh intends to shock Calvin with low voltage in an attempt to wake him. Hugh electrocutes Calvin somehow in exactly the right spot. Calvin comes back to life and grabs Hugh's hands. Hugh tries to distract Calvin with a broken wand, but it loses interest and begins to hold Hugh's fingers tighter, breaking Hugh's finger and causing him to collapse from pain. Calvin, with its newfound intellect, emerges from its box. Calvin enters the rat box and engulfs the rat after analyzing it. Rory rushes into the lab to rescue Hugh, which he succeeds in doing, but Calvin clutches his leg as he tries to escape. When David notices this, he quickly closes the lab door, preventing Calvin from escaping. Kat agrees to let Rory use an incinerator to kill the creature. Wait, why in the world would you have an incinerator inside the space station? There's no plausible application or use of the incinerator unless it's for this very specific instance. I'm calling it now. Sin. Rory then sets it on fire, but Calvin dodges and hides until Rory runs out of fuel. When Rory tries to locate Calvin, it appears behind him and goes into Rory's mouth, killing him. Calvin grows bigger as it comes out of Rory's mouth. Calvin can sense an airflow and uses the fire hydrant as a way to escape. Sho and Kat attempt to block all of the airflow holes, but Calvin was faster. Kat informs the control center on Earth that Calvin is suspected of becoming lethal and that they will attempt to isolate and eliminate it in accordance with protocol. Outside communications are down in the middle of delivering that information. Kat decides to fix the transmitter by spacewalking. Calling it right now, bad idea. Kat notices that the transmitter is hotter than it should be, just like Ryan Reynolds. Ayo! Calvin exits the coolant and grabs Kat's suit as Kat releases the valve. David heads to the airlock to kill Calvin as soon as Kat gets there. Calvin, on the other hand, breaks the coolant tube, causing the liquids to overflow into Kat's helmet. Kat tries to open the airlock, but then she changes her mind and decides not to open the door. She lets herself be killed since she doesn't want Calvin to enter the station again. Calvin tries to re-enter the station using the station's maneuvering thrusters. They fire the thrusters to blast Calvin away, but they exhaust so much fuel that the ISS enters a decaying orbit and burns up in the Earth's atmosphere. Even though it will allow Calvin to re-enter, show suggests using the ISS remaining fuel to return to a safe orbit. They devise a strategy to survive. They will isolate themselves at Tranquility while venting the rest of the station to make Calvin dormant. Hugh and Miranda will patrol from the east, while David and Show will inspect the poles and secure each compartment. This is probably one of the few times that I would agree with splitting up. It makes more sense for them to split up and increase the chances of group survival. Hugh senses Calvin's presence but can't tell if it's Calvin or not. After sealing all the pathways that allow Calvin to enter, they gather at Tranquility. Hugh's heart begins to weaken suddenly. Show grabs the defibrillator and shocks Hugh. Hugh's heart returned to normal after a few attempts, but Miranda notices something strange inside Hugh's pants. Miranda unzips his trousers and sees Calvin eating his leg. Miranda shocks Calvin with the defibrillator and it begins to chase them. Show believes that it is too late for him to join Miranda and David, so he locks himself inside a sleeping pod as Calvin tries to break in. Miranda and David return to the Tranquility, where they use Hugh's body to attract Calvin away from the Tranquility and trap it on the other side. They learn that a Soyuz spacecraft is on its way to intercept a distress call from Kat earlier. David wants to alert Soyuz not to attempt to enter the ISS, but Miranda explains that Soyuz is attempting to push them into deep space. Show, on the other hand, exits the sleeping pod and attempts to board the craft, but Calvin manages to keep him from doing so. Miranda and David try to prevent Show from getting sucked into outer space, but Show lets go of Miranda and drags Calvin along with him. Show is unfortunately pulled away into space and dies, whilst Calvin manages to escape. David and Miranda believe Calvin will follow them into Earth's atmosphere, so they'll use one of the ISS 2 escape pods to lure him in. David will then manually drive Calvin's pod into outer space, isolate it, and let Miranda return to Earth in the other pod. Their strategy appears to be working, but of course, that didn't last long. Miranda's pod is struck by debris, and David is assaulted by Calvin. Miranda tapes a black box message to warn Earth of Calvin's danger as her pod goes astray. The film ends with one of these two pods crashing into the sea and being discovered by Vietnamese fishermen. It's David's pod, and Calvin was still well and alive. As other boats arrive on the scene, the Vietnamese fishermen open David's pod despite his warnings. And I think we all know what happens after that. This movie felt short with a simple premise. Yes, it was just a little less than 2 hours long, but it definitely didn't feel like it. The trailer they released basically spoiled the entire movie. However, that's not to say this isn't a good movie, or at least for me. Like, seriously, how can you not be obsessed when both Jake Gyllenhaal and Ryan Reynolds are both on screen? If there's any takeaway from all of this, it's that you should be more careful when dealing with the unknown. Sure, it could be a cute vegetarian pet alien, or it could just be the start of human extinction. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you like this video, go ahead and click that like button down below. Subscribe if you want to see more content just like this, and ring that bell to get notified whenever we post a new video. Investigators, you are dismissed.